It is my real pleasure to introduce our speaker today, the current president of the Society, Reed Larson. Reed received his PhD in 1979 at the University of Chicago in Human Development and Psychology. Currently, he is professor in the Department of Human and Community Development at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, where he held the Pampered Chef Endowed Chair in Family Resiliency from 2003 to 2008. Professor Larson has been the editor-in-chief of New Directions for Child and Adolescent Development since 2005 and has served on numerous journal editorial boards, including the International Journal of Behavioral Development and Applied Developmental Science. He is co-author of several books, including Divergent Realities, The Emotional Lives of Mothers, Fathers, and Adolescents, and a second book that I will mention by name, Being Adolescent, Conflict and Growth in the Teenage Years. Professor Larson is co-editor of several volumes and is author of close to 200 chapters and journal articles. Professor Larson's research focuses on the daily experiences of adolescents in the different contexts of life. He is well known for his early research using the experience sampling method, commonly known as the beeper method, to study adolescents' media use, time alone, and experiences with family and friends. His current primary area of interest is adolescents' experience in community-based programs, extracurricular activities, and other structured voluntary activities in the after-school hours. A secondary area of interest is adolescence and globalization. His talk today, entitled Positive Development in a Disorderly World, will focus our attention on the need to understand how young people learn to navigate difficult, complex, real-life challenges during a time of rapid social change. Please join me in welcoming the current president of the Society, Reed Larson.
You done?
Handshake.
Thank you. All mine now, huh? There must be some mistake. I don't know. It couldn't be me up here. And I've spent a lot of time in my talk, but I sat about halfway in the back of this room last time, and I couldn't see the person's face or let alone their eyeballs. So I want to make a deal with you, which is I'm going to follow my notes pretty closely because I put a lot of time in here, and I'll look up periodically, but I think I'd like to give my heart and soul to reading this carefully. Is that a deal? Yeah? Okay. So our conference comes at a time of global recession, an event that reminds us emphatically how disorderly the world is that adolescents must prepare to enter. Over years, investors and ordinary people created ballooning debt. Borrowed money was used to leverage more borrowing. Then the balloon burst, and precipitating a chain reaction through every sector of the economy and part of the world. Foreclosures, bankruptcies, unemployment, especially among youth, and those darn furloughs on top of it. The theories and models of economics, the most math-based science, were proven wrong. The lesson was that economic processes are less orderly than thought. Economists turned to John Maynard Keynes. Heterogeneous processes are at work. Different situations bring to the fore different dynamics. Human systems do not always obey grand theories. Now, other Bronfenbrenner systems show similar unruliness. Political systems, cultures, religious and community institutions all exhibit dynamics that can be just plain bizarre. We have banks too big to fail, government dysfunction, think California, New York, structural racism in societies founded on principles of equality, cultural wars among people of the same European culture. Adolescents must be prepared to deal with systems containing paradox, catch-22s, bureaucracy, and BS. You can see this isn't going to be an ordinary talk on positive development. Now, globalization is not creating a more orderly world for youth. For 400 years, people believed the world was evolving towards becoming a more rational, just, and well-functioning machine. Yet, in the words of sociologist Anthony Giddens, living in the modern world is more like being aboard a careening juggernaut than a controlled, well-driven motor car. Now, the world isn't entirely chaotic. There is order, but our diagrams of the human ecology suggest it may be a little more neat and tidy than it actually is. If the analogy is to the ecology in nature, it contains tremendous heterogeneity and disorder. Microbic to macro ecosystems interact and intertwined, but also competitive in chaotic ways. When we're talking about the human ecology, the real world that adolescents must learn, a key point is that all of Bronfenbrenner's systems are composed of multiple human minds, each with idiosyncrasies. No wonder things get bizarre. I'm going to use heterogeneous, eclectic, pluralistic to remind us of multiple minds, multiple dynamics, both within and between systems. And I'm going to talk later about some youth who are trying to get principals to adhere to the school district's disciplinary code. But to do that, to achieve their goal, they had to understand the different strange ways that school board members, principals, teachers, and students think. They had to use ecological reasoning. So there is order to the world, but it's not neat, tidy, and logical. It's messy, pluralistic, and ecological. You know this already, right? I'm not telling you anything new. The point is, this disorder and complexity shapes the developmental challenges faced by teens. Now, William James said, we carve out order by leaving the disorderly part out. I found this in a book, How Doctors Think. And maybe doctors can get away with it, but adolescents can't. This is especially true if you're poor or youth of color. When Frank Furstenberg talked to us at our conference in San Francisco, he described being poor as like a game where dice are loaded against you, each roll adding to the cumulative odds of disadvantage. Margaret Spencer describes how African American male youth are subject to catch-22s across micro to macro ecological systems. But regardless of class or race, a young person trying to get a toehold in the adult world needs to develop competencies to navigate disorder as best they can. But what navigational competencies are required, and how the heck do you develop them? This is part of one of those big questions that help us think about important developmental issue. And the big question I'm going to focus on is the problem of human agency. Agency is the ability to set goals and organize one's actions to reach them, to get from point A to point B. The promise since the Enlightenment has been, as visualized recently by Nobel economist Amartya Sen, a world in which all people are free to fulfill their capabilities. But to achieve this, even if the world were more just, adolescents need to develop skills to exercise agency, to work towards goals. Here are some examples of why that's so important. If you're poor, middle class, or one of the many students here, you need these competencies to reach the goal of meaningful adult employment. You need skills to navigate your way through a labyrinth which is increasingly destandardized, longer, and uncertain. And if you get a job, more and more jobs require dealing with unstructured problems, trying to achieve difficult goals, creating, developing, implementing, conducting a research project from beginning to end. Jobs requiring rote labor are paying less and disappearing. Competencies for agency are also related to well-being.